Well, good evening. There's Mark Bunzel popping in. Hello there, kind sir. Mark Bunzel, how are you this evening?
Hello, Peter. Welcome everybody to Seattle Boat Show Live, and we've got another show. Peter, we're what, on show number 14?
You know, I'm running out of toes. Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, what a fantastic endeavor this has been. We started back when, I guess about 14 weeks ago, and we weren't sure
Yep.
how this was going to take off. And every week our attendance seems to grow. It's so really so thankful for the viewers at home to share an hour or so with us. And I think we've got a fantastic full show tonight. What do we got in store, Mark?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about, continue the discussion from last week about couples cruising, and we've got Dan and Karin Leech to talk about that. Before we get into that, though, we're going to be going through our updates, and we've got a lot of interesting updates that Leonard and Lorena are going to be covering. And Leonard's also going to talk about the situation in Canada, some worthwhile messages there. And then we're going to transition. Our main topic for tonight is to continue our discussion from a couple weeks ago about the whales. And the whales are becoming an issue, and we've got two experts on that, George Harris and our president and executive director of the NMTA, and Todd Hass will be joining us. Yeah, we got a very interesting show.
Yeah, Todd's a PhD. I don't know if you knew that, Mark. He knows his stuff, so we've got to bring our A game. I hope you were been doing your Sudoku and taking those fish oil pills.
I better have, but I'm pleased that he's taking the time to join us. So with that, why don't we, before Peter comes up with another joke, why don't we come up with Leonard and Lorena and give us some updates of what's going on in Puget Sound and the San Juan Islands to start.
Great question.
We'll go through these quickly. I know we have a full show tonight. Shilsho Bay Marina, we had a report that some of the washers and dryers aren't working, but do keep in mind that the new laundry facilities and restrooms are currently under construction, and they're slated to be up and ready mid-September. As far as pump outs, Blake Island pump out is not working. Kingston pump out is not operational. The pump out at Jeristock is operational and up and running. And speaking of pump outs, the Sea Grant just made a news release on August 24th. There's a new mobile app for boaters. Actually, the app's been around, but the Pump Out Nav app now includes pump out locations for Washington State. The Pump Out Nav is a free iOS Android mobile phone app, and the app uses the boater's location information to suggest the nearest pump out stations, either on a map or as a list. And boaters can also report issues on various facilities on the app. So it's a fabulous app. It's interactive, easy to use. And you can download this free app at the Apple App Store or Google Play. And if you're looking for more information or a list of pump outs, the state also has a website where you can go and find the locations for pump outs. That website is pumpoutwashington.org. And let's see what else.
Before you go on to the next item, I'm just going to introduce Dan Leech and Karin Leech, who just joined the call. And many of you know them, and especially Dan from his years at West Marine and at the Center for Wooden Boats. And Dan, in a prior career, was an actual on the radio, I believe.
It's been a few decades, but you bet.
He's still got the voice, though. So anyway,
Nice,
glad you could join us. They're also correspondents for the Waggoner guides. They're out there cruising around and helping us to update the book, and I'm excited to hear about some of the things they're going to have. Lorena, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Okay, we'll continue on here. Odland County Park, boaters should be aware that the buoys are not available. They're actually locked. They have a device over the ring, and that's due to maintenance. And they tell us they should be available again around September 7th.
Mats Bay. If people have ever been into Mats Bay, just north of Port Ludlow. If you hit in there, we just discovered through our field correspondent, Jim Norris, let us know that all of Matz Bay is a private aquatic land. And so you are free to anchor in there, but you're subject to the rules. And one of the rules is that it's a 5-night limit anchoring in Matz Bay. And it is monitored by the people that live around there. When Jim was there, he was there on his 4th night, I guess, and somebody approached him at the public dock when he was there taking excuse me, not the public dock, the public boat launch when he had his dog on shore. So it is monitored, 5-night limit. And then the last one we had on our critical list, or the hot items, was Yellow Island is still closed. It's been closed, and it's closed for COVID-19. So no visits to Yellow Island, and that's in the San Juans. If you've ever visited there, it's a conservancy and a great place to visit, but it's closed right now. So hopefully it'll open sometime soon. We want to go through a few updates here on San Juan Islands before we turn it over to Dan and Karin to talk also about San Juan Islands. We were up there for a short week, and kind of our short summary of that is that it was great cruising. It's busy up there, and the main destinations are definitely full, and but there are still a number of out-of-the-way places. You can find some semi-private places to anchor, 1 or 2 boats beside you, and some great cruising up there. And we'll talk about a few of those. So let's want to start with Lopez.
Yes, I'll start with Lopez. Hunter Bay was busy, but it wasn't full, so still space there. Mud Bay had only a few boats, and we actually anchored between Hunter and Spencer Spit, and there were only 2 or 3 boats anchored there. Spencer Spit was very busy, so be aware that that's a busy place.
And then Blakely Island, Blakely Island Marina, we stopped by there, and that place was very busy. The short-term stay dock, which has a max of 1 hour, but I would encourage you not to stay. Don't even dream of staying the full hour there. That was very busy. Fuel dock, everybody was stopping, heading into the store. It was wonderful. There's fresh donuts there, and of course they have overnight moorage at that location. Very popular.
There's a nice hike around Blake Island that my family recently did, so I encourage everyone to check that out. Just watch out for the raccoons.
Fisherman Bay was another very busy place on the west side of Lopez. It was full, marinas were full, the anchorage was full. So make note of that if you're headed there. East Sound, we stopped at Rosario. It was busy, but there were still 2 or 3 mooring buoys available. That was in early Saturday afternoon. The village, we went up to the north end of East Sound, and the village of East Sound was active. Shops are open, restaurants are open. The Brown Bear Bakery is fabulous, one of our favorites. Stop in there. Masks are a must. Do wear your mask around town and in the shops. They have hand sanitizer in all the shops, and so they have their act together there. The public dock at East Sound there, it's only about 40 or 45 feet. It used to be that you could stay overnight on the dock. Now it's day use only. And it's used mainly by dinghies and skiffs that come in from boats that are anchored nearby just off the dock there. There's a 4-hour maximum. And let's see, you had some more information about anchorage.
Up on East Sound, so near the East Sound Village and at the head of East Sound. So this is a place that doesn't get that many boats up there. Many times off season, there'll be nobody up there. We were up there and there were probably at most about 10 other boats in various locations. There's great anchoring in Fishing Bay, right off of the village, but also over on the western shore along the western area. There's some good anchoring over there. And then Jed Cove, it's actually Jed Bay, but it's also known as Jed Cove. And there's a great anchorage in there for about 4 or 5 boats. It's well protected. And in there there's a restored lime kiln in there that it's part of the Jed Cove Land Trust Preserve. There's some trails on that. You can get a glimpse of the lime kiln from the bay if you're in there with a dinghy or the kayak. Right now there's a sign on the shore. This is a public area. But there's a sign on the shore that says that no launching or landing of watercraft. So we're trying to pursue whether they really don't want anybody landing on the beach, but you're free to go into the cove or in the bay and you can get some glimpses of this restored lime kiln that's in there. It's a fascinating place to go. Lorena?
We also went to West Sound, and there are a few spaces available at the docks at West Sound Marina. Sale is pending. We'll find out who the new owners of the marina will be in a couple months. The anchorage at the public dock, which is nearby, that seemed pretty full. There was space at the day use public dock, however. And then further north in West Sound, there's plenty of space to anchor in Massacre Bay. And we actually anchored south of Skull Island and found lots of sticky mud. So it's good holding, a great place to anchor.
Very good.
There were only a couple boats there. They were kayaking and swimming and just enjoying the lovely spot.
Yeah. So one of the other Parks Bay, we motored past that. There was plenty of space available in Parks Bay. There were probably about 4 other boats in there, but again, lots of space available for anchoring. And from there, we went up to, or did you want to talk about Deer Harbor?
I was just going to say, Deer Harbor was very busy. The anchorage was full. We thought about anchoring there, and it was so full, we departed and got our pictures, of course, and drone shots and so forth. North Bay, we also went there. It's in the north end of Griffin Bay. It's called North Bay, and it's not often visited. We and one other boat in the entire bay, so you might keep that in mind as a place to go if you haven't been. It is exposed to southeasterly winds, but it's a nice spot to anchor. There's a beach, you can go ashore.
There's
quite nice.
A great beach there at North Bay, and this is a seldom visited. We had some friends that are avid boaters, and we mentioned that we were in North Bay, and they said, "Where's that?" And it's on the kind of the northeast side of San Juan Island. Kind of if you picture Friday Harbor, if you were to kind of flip south of that over the land and find the nearest water, that's North Bay. There's a park there with a beautiful beach, a driftwood strewn beach, and you can land there. If you had bicycles, you could probably ride into Friday Harbor from there. Great little location. As Lorena pointed out, there was only one other boat there. That was a weekend night we were there, so not busy at all. We also made the stop. We went up to Susha Island. Susha Island was, Fossil Bay was full. I should say it had a lot of people in it, a lot of boats. This was a weekday, so it was about Tuesday or Wednesday. But there were about 4 buoys available in Fossil Bay at about noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, somewhere in the early afternoon. Echo Bay, we anchored in there, and there were about 50 boats, but of course that's in Echo Bay, that's nothing. So there was plenty of room, and it was a very, very pleasant night. Went up on shore, very few people. I think we encountered one other group on one of the trails, and that was about it. But it was very, very pleasant, very nice.
I thought I'd run down a few BC updates, and then Dan and Karin are going to share their travels. Correspondents Roger and Andrea Debussy and NBC just sent in their updates. They were in Lyle Harbor, and they tell us the outdoor market is closed for the year, and the Saturna Paddle Shack is closed. Ladysmith Community Marina, they said, was full. It was very busy. Montague Harbor, also very busy. All of the mooring buoys were occupied, they tell us. And they have some information, and the Van Isle Marina in Sydney, they say now is presently the only place to get fuel in the Sydney area. The pumps have been taken out of Canoe Cove, and it's their understanding that Canoe Cove will no longer be selling fuel for mariners. Fuel dock burned on Mother's Day, so that's the situation there.
Lorena, I think we're losing you a little bit with your volume.
Okay,
There you go.
better?
That's great.
Okay. Should I repeat it? So, and Van Isle is the only place to get fuel now in the Sydney area. The pumps have been taken out of Canoe Cove Marina, and Canoe Cove will no longer be selling fuel for mariners. North Saanich fuel dock burned on Mother's Day, so that's the situation in that area. They observed that Canadian Border Patrol services have increased their presence in the waters this year. They saw boats being pulled over and checked, and several boats spent multiple hours at the Van Isle Customs Dock with officers. Just again, taking care of business as needed. They also noted that fisheries and oceans are patrolling the killer whale sanctuary zones that were put in place around Saturna and the Pindar Islands. So be aware that there are sanctuary zones around Saturna and Pindar Islands.
And we have those noted in the 2020 Waggoner Guide, correct?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, that's kind of our update, and turn that over to, I guess, Dan and Karin. Have you got some updates?
Absolutely. We spent some time out in the islands as well. You guys were over on the east side, but we went over to the west side anchorages in the San Juan Islands in the last week and a half, and beautiful sailing. As you all know, the weather was just great up until the last couple of days when it started getting a little bit testy. But, you know, the point you made earlier is very important. It is very busy everywhere. Americans can't go to Canada. Canadians can't come to the United States. And folks have finally decided we're coming anyways. And so a lot of boats have been coming up, as they should, and a lot of activity on the charter docks here in Anacortes, where we live. So there's a lot of activity out there, and so it makes it super busy out there, especially in the more popular parks and anchorages. The buoys are hard to get in the close and smaller state parks. Space on the docks is hard to get. Just as a reminder, most all of those San Juan County marinas are operating at half capacity. So reservations is really important if you can get them. We were leaving Garrison Bay, as an example, at 10 o'clock in the morning, one weekday morning, and went by Roach Harbor, and people were talking on Channel 16 about the waiting list at 10 in the morning was already 35 boats to get into Roach Harbor. And I just have never, ever heard a 35 boat waiting list at 10 in the morning going by there. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing. Karin?
Yeah, one of the things that we noticed was a shift in the type of boats that were coming into the anchorages in the San Juans. And we went to Blind Bay, we went to Garrison Bay. You know, English Camp is closed, but there were a lot more larger yachts coming in. And so the anchorage was very tight. And as you probably know, Garrison Bay is pretty shallow. But there was a 75-foot yacht that came in and was in the very shallow end along the buoy line. And, you know, it was very tight. So it reminds you that you need to be very cognizant of your anchoring practices and your anchoring manners. We had a guy try to anchor very close to us, and we were uncomfortable. He was uncomfortable, and it's, if you think you're too close, you probably are, and you should reset.
Did Dan use the technique of standing out on the bow and crossing his arms over his chest and giving him the skunk eye?
Yelling,
No,
do you know who I am?
I was sitting in my like hanging chair over the dock, just having a drink, looking at him and going, "Skipper, I think that might be a little too close." And he says, "Yeah, you're probably right."
But the other thing is, what was very interesting to us is also, and it's just a reminder, because, you know, Dan and I live on our boat, and we're a team, and we try to be very good at communicating. But there was a couple that were trying to anchor in. The woman clearly was not well versed in releasing the anchor, and the guy was yelling and swearing at her. And, you know, this is right in the middle of a very busy anchorage, and it's just, be courteous, watch your manners, be aware of where you're anchoring and how your boat, you know, may impact others. So
Another reminder about Garrison Bay, by the way, if you're going in there, you know, Westcott Bay Oyster Company is open, serving to their outside tables, but you will need a reservation possibly 3 days in advance if you want to get one of those outside tables to sit there and eat. You can do takeout in the restaurant, but as I said, it is, you know, think ahead where you're going. One of the other places we went was back to Shaw Island and Blind Bay, one of our favorite places to just hang out. It was super busy, but that's a pretty big anchorage and there's a lot of room in there. And as Karin says, take your time. It's also not a bad time to talk about reprovisioning just a little bit in the island. You know, the stores are open. Wear your masks, of course. But Friday Harbor has always been, you know, the very popular resupply in the islands. But getting into the marina there, as I mentioned, they're at 50% occupancy. It's a lot tougher than normal years. So I'll put in a plug for the guys at Orcas Landing, because we love to drop the hook in Blind Bay on Shaw and just take the dinghy across to the lovely county dock over there and go up and go into the Orcas Landing store. You know, it's smaller than King's, obviously, but they've always had really great quality produce and food and meats and everything that we could need in there. So that was always a lot of fun. Karin?
Dan,
You
did
got
you
an
want
update
to talk about the Saddleback?
No, first you were going to talk about Reed Harbor a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So we did not actually go to Reed Harbor. We thought about doing it, but we had heard from some friends who live on the dock with the same dock as us that it was crazy busy in Provost and Reed. And again, it was the larger yachts that you would normally see up in Prieto Haven in Desolation Sound. There were a lot of larger yachts that were going to these areas, which is just a different, you know, boat pattern than we're used to in the San Juan Islands, at least from our experience. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, if you have a favorite hidey hole that you're going to, there could be boats in it. Be ready to move and be ready to go to the next one. And Leonard and Lorena, your point about those small spots you haven't tried yet, you know, this is the year to say, hey, maybe I'm going to go do one of those. And those create those magical moments that we all love, and that's why we do this. That's why we go boating. You know, we had one of those ourselves when we went out last Friday night. We were anchored off Saddleback, which is right on the edge of Padilla Bay, not far from Anacortes. The twilight was coming on. We had dinner. We were having a drink in the cockpit, and we were getting ready to go down. And then all of a sudden, dozens and dozens of racing sailboats shot the gap between there and Guaymas Island heading north. And you realize, oh my gosh, it's the Anacortes Yacht Club's, the Northern Century was headed up for the turning point up at Point Roberts, which I hear from some of my racing friends, the winds were so bad they got there at like 3 in the morning to make the turn, and you know, but still it was just
so bad in that they were light for
light, testing their light air skills.
Not bad, meaning good.
But meaning good. But it was beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful scene to see all those boats come through, and I assure you, one of those pictures I took will be the next background on my computer.
Great.
Excellent. Well, gosh, all this boating activity makes me think about the next topic, Mark. Should we jump right into that one?
Yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about the situation in Canada. And just as a transition point, Canadian authorities had indicated that, the next deadline to make a decision would be tomorrow, August 21st. And on schedule, they typically announce the status of that a week in advance. And a week ago, they announced that the border will not open. And they're going to make a decision again on September 21st. But I think it's pretty safe to say the season and the ability to go to Canada has passed. It's not going to happen this year. And I wouldn't recommend going up after September 21st. That's right about the point that the weather changes in the Straits and getting up into Canada. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen for this year. But we've had a lot of activity and press, and some inaccurate press, about American boats possibly not following procedures to go into Canada. And Leonard, you want to talk about this? You investigated this further, and tell us about the NPR article and video on this.
Yeah, that's so the source of this is an NPR article that came out on August 2nd that was laced with inaccurate and incorrect statements. At the basis of it was some information that came from the BC Watchers. So I think in the past, some of our sessions here in the past, we've shared with people that the BC folks are watching. They're watching with AIS signal. This NPR article incorrectly tried to state that that all passenger vessels are required to have AIS transponders, which of course is not correct. And recreational vessels under 20 meters or 65 feet are not required to have AIS transponders, and they're also not required to have those transponders transmitting. But apparently the BC Watchers are reportedly using this information to follow American boats as they, quote, sneak into BC waters. And again, this article was laced with inaccuracies, and I think it's important for us to set the record straight. If you're on social media of some sort that is boating related and you see this kind of stuff, then I encourage you to put some facts out there. And that's what we need right now, are facts. And for instance, in regards to U.S. boats in Canada, there are a number of U.S. boats, U.S. flagged boats that are in Canada, and some of those are transmitting AIS. And some instances, for instance, dual citizenship. There are individuals in Canada that have dual citizenship or are through marriage or through family. There's a boat that is owned in the United States, based in the United States, and it is in Canada, and it is in the hands of Canadian boaters that are on board. They're boating up there. There's also instances where Canadians may have purchased a U.S. boat down here and have not re-registered it yet. So it's U.S. flagged, and it's Canadians that are piloting these boats that are on board. And this is part of the missing information right now that's not being reported by the BC Watchers, because they're not on this boat. They're looking at an AIS signal and trying to interpret or intimate from that what the actions are of the boat. Another one is there are established correct procedures for boats to pass from Washington up to Alaska and return again. They're CBSA procedures, they're well documented, and they're well followed. That's part of that procedure. For instance, if you're starting down here in Washington waters, your process is that you cross the water border. And as you cross that water border, you then go to a port of entry. Well, that could be, if it's not correctly interpreted, it could be interpreted as sneaking across. But indeed, some of these vessels are indeed following procedures, and they're going to the port of entry where they check in. By the way, the part of the process now, CBSA apparently changed this process later on, and they now require that boats that are passing through not only clear into at a port of entry, but they must clear out of Canadian waters at the exit point as well. So they've tightened up this, and we actually have a report from a boat that went up several months ago and recently returned on a pass through, and they did indeed follow all the prescribed procedure of going directly as possible. They are allowed to anchor along the way. They are allowed to go in and get fuel. They're asked not to get provisions. And these boats, the one that we're talking about that we do have reports back from, indeed did exactly all of that. So again, we thank Canada for doing that. We thank the BC, but there are extenuating circumstances. The other one I wanted to add was that the COVID numbers down here in the United States in general are high, yes, but there's 50 states here, and if you break it down, there's some states that have some pretty low numbers. There are some states that have some pretty high numbers. That exact same situation happens in Canada. There are some provinces in Canada. BC has some extremely low numbers, very well done, but Quebec has some pretty high numbers. Ontario has some high numbers as well. So if there's a fear factor, the appeal here is the fear factor is the coronavirus. It's not Americans, it's the coronavirus. And it's an appeal to say the enemy is the coronavirus. And let's kill the virus, but heal the border. Let's pull this border back together again. Someday it's going to open up, and we want to make sure that we as individuals are ready to embrace each other when we're welcome and open to do that. So let's focus on the coronavirus enemy. That is the enemy right now. So that's
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Leonard. Well, again, all this boating activity has also cropped up in different news articles, and it sets the scene for a crowded Puget Sound area, San Juan area, Salish Sea area, which makes me think about the southern resident killer whales, Mark. And
Absolutely.
I want to move on to that topic. Todd and George, if you want to come on with your cameras, and we can segue into talking about southern resident killer whales. There's Dr. Todd Hass. Hi, Todd. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
George
Nice.
Harris, our president and executive director of the NMTA, who was also on the committees dealing with the regulations around whale regulations. Thank you very much for joining us, George.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. Hi, Peter. Thanks for including us tonight. Hi there, Todd. Good to see you.
Hey, George. Thank you all for bringing me out tonight. This is nice to be with you.
Yeah, we wanted to come back, and we had an evening presentation on whales and had some great people involved. It was a very popular show, and Leonard, Lorena, myself, and I suspect Dan and Karin have also seen it, have seen some, granted, poor behavior of boaters around the whales. And we wanted to talk about that a little bit further. Todd, you can comment. I understand we've got 3 mama orca whales that are pregnant, and we don't want to jeopardize that. That's a little bit higher than normal. And the main thing we're trying to do is to make sure we replenish and build the southern resident orca whales, correct?
Yeah. I want to make sure that, folks know that there are some really common sense things that they can do to give the whales space and slow down around them that make a real difference and will make a difference, hopefully, with the calves coming into the population.
Before we got too deep in the subject, I wanted just to give a little background on Todd and just really applaud Todd, the way you handled yourself during the Southern Resident Killer Whale Task Force that convened for over, I think, a year. You staffed it. You serve as the special assistant to the director of the Puget Sound Partnership, Laura Blackmore, and just wanted to applaud the way you carried yourself. There was a very tense negotiations at times with the tribes and the environmental community and industry and all kinds of stakeholders, and the way that you were able to finesse the group and get them to some common understandings that culminated with some new legislation, which the bill signing probably had 150 people there. I'm sure you were front and center at that as well, but just I never seen anything like it. So I just wanted to pay tribute to you and your style of leadership, and definitely are held in high regard in our office. So just wanted to share that with you.
I'm very flattered. Thank you, Peter.
And then George, you were on that same task force, and you were able to get our voice heard, which was awesome. Oftentimes, or sometimes it's not always the case where we can be a part at the table. And we were at the table. We weren't just heard, but we actually were able to kind of push our message forward in a way that resulted in some meaningful legislation. George, do you want to talk a little bit about where things started and where they ended up?
Yeah, well, I think oftentimes, Peter, I think boaters and anglers are misunderstood, particularly, this audience, cruising boaters. That was my message to the task force, is that boaters want to do the right thing. And as a community, we need to take this seriously and be role models. Another important message is, people don't own boats or buy boats to go whale watching. It's about going to the beautiful state parks and all these awesome destinations we have, or up into British Columbia. And, I thought the regulations were totally appropriate and totally reasonable, increasing the distance that recreational boats need to stay from the southern resident killer whales. And you can't tell the difference between a transient or a Biggs whale, so them too. And then it also goes same for the humpback whales and the gray whales and any of the other big mammals we have in Puget Sound. So I think it was reasonable and the right thing to do. And just encourage boats, when you're on the water, you really got to pay attention when the southern residents or the transients are in the area. And how do you know? And that was something that really kind of hung up the task force, is should we be communicating, on one of the VHF channels or something that there's whales in the, attention all mariners, there's whales in the area, or should we kind of keep it quiet? And there was concern that if you broadcast it, it's going to bring more boats in. And then another, challenge with the task force was, what is the role of the commercial whale watching boats? Are they helpful or are they not helpful? And in the end, I thought they were helpful because I think they too can be role models on the water. And so, Mark, you and I talked about this last time, that when you see a group of boats on the water, it's not usually the first thing that you think that there's whales in the area. You really have to get into that mindset, and maybe that's something that an experienced boater would know or an experienced cruiser would know. So I think if there's any new boaters watching tonight, and we know that there's new boaters or people getting back into boating right now this summer because of COVID, that's something you need to keep in mind. If you see more boats going slowly in a place that you normally wouldn't see them, probably means whales are in the area. Slow down. And then I think we had Frankie from the San Juan County Resources on talking about the whale warning flag, which I think is just the best tool. It's colorful. It's not something you normally see on the water. Nicely done, Dan. Nicely done, by the way. Nice to see you, Dan. I left my whale warning flag at home. So when you see that, slow down. And I'll
Go
stop.
back over the distances, George, and how was that determined? And how did that discussion go? How far should we stay away?
Well, it was a tough discussion because, the science, I don't think, was completely conclusive on either side. And, since, I don't think whale watching is a primary activity for recreational boaters, I was in full support of it. So, in the US, you need to say 300 yards on the sides of the whales, and then 400 yards in front or behind the whales. And then going slow when you're at 7 knots, when you're a half mile from the whales. Did I get that right, Todd?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the chat box for everybody to be able to look at that later.
Just Google Be Whale Wise, and right on their homepage, there's a nice graphic.
Don't tell them my secrets, George.
Oh, okay. And, some people say, well, why not just simplify it and make it 300 yards all the way around? Or, but I think the most important message is, if you can see a fin or if you can see a blow from one of the whales, just slow down into idle speed. And, because it may not be that they're all in one pod, they could be spread out. So go slow. And I know, when you're on the water, you're trying to make a tide, you're trying to get someplace before the weather changes, or you're trying to, get to an anchorage before it gets dark or something like that. But, slowing down for 30 minutes, I think is totally appropriate. And then you can get into some of the other things you should do. If you're comfortable with it and it's safe to do so, you should turn off your sonar. Most sonars are at 50 kilohertz. This is something that is really in Todd's wheelhouse. Some of the fishing boats, recreational fishing boats, will transmit at 200 kilohertz. But if you've got sonar on, you don't know what frequency you're on, it's best to turn it off. And I support that. Todd could probably comments on that.
Yeah, I think the Coast Guard wants to make sure that if folks are going to turn off their depth sounders or echo sounders, fish finders, that they turn them back on for safety's sake, or have a plan for, reminding themselves to turn it back on when it's necessary. But NOAA's research, where they put the suction cups on the sides of the southern residents' heads to see what they're detecting underwater, have found that they're getting those sounds, those emissions from the echo sounders about 30+% of the time that they're diving underneath for prey. And so by limiting their exposure to this potential interference with their sonar, we could do a lot of good. So the Puget Sound Harbor Safety Committee did, passed a voluntary standard of care to promote this among the recreational boating community. And I want to make sure that folks know that the southern residents are regulars within central Puget Sound, in fall. So October, November, I grew up in Edmonds. I've seen them from shore there 2 of the last 3 years in November and October. And so it's not only in the San Juans or the Strait that we may intercept them, but we can expect them down here in our backyard for the Seattleites of the greater Seattle area.
Just last night I was watching Disney Plus, and maybe that could be a future sponsor. There's a new show called A Dog's Life with Bill Farmer. Todd, have you heard about this show?
No.
So he does this guy. It's A Dog's Life with Bill Farmer. He does a goofy voice, and there's a dog, and I'm sure you're familiar with the dog, Ina. Their first episode takes place in the San Juans, and it's this dog that goes around and smells the whale poop.
Oh.
So it's a fantastic show. Do you want to talk a little bit, Todd, about they're talking about the stress of the whales have because of different activities, and then the reason that we know that whales like king salmon is by studying their poop, which these dogs are able to do. Can you talk a little bit about the science behind activity and stress? And
Sure. I mean, we know from these studies that through Sam Wasser, Deborah Giles at the University of Washington that have these dogs that tell us where the scat is in the water, and they can tell us about the stress hormones, the corticosteroids that are in their bloodstream. They may give us an indication of periods of prey scarcity when the whales are experiencing prey shortage, or they may tell us about times when they're seeing too many boats nearby. We know that in right whales in the Atlantic after 9/11, when shipping was suspended, that similar sorts of research, showed a drop in the stress hormones. And so there are ways for us to kind of infer what the stress levels in the whales are. And we don't want, stressed whales, especially ones that are pregnant, when they're raising calves. All of these things can compromise the immune system and hurt the potential for population growth with our southern residents.
with all of the fact that we can't vacation to Europe on going cruises, George, there's been obviously an influx in boat sales, boat registrations, boat activity. Can you set the record straight on where we are with boat sales and what that's looking like as the president of NMTA?
A bit like Leonard, I took exception to a recent story that KUOW did. I was interviewed last week, and I guess you can make any case with numbers depending on what numbers used and how you present them. But I'm president of the Northwest Marine Trade Association, and I hope boat sales are up. I like to say sometimes that's our mission. I want folks to wake up in the morning and say, let's buy a boat, or if they already own a boat, I like folks to wake up in the morning and say, let's use a boat. That's great. We all know how wonderful boating is. And there's no doubt, if you know somebody who's in the boating industry, there's a lot of activity in boat right now, boat sales, boat service, that sort of thing. But we have to go back and remember that in March, April, and May, it was almost illegal to sell a boat at that time during the shutdown, if you will. So anyway, pleased to report new boat sales are up 5% year to date. So from January 1 of 2020 to July 31, 2020, compared to those same months a year ago, for new boats registered in the state of Washington going into the fleet of new boats, there's 230 more boats in Washington state on the waters right now than there was a year ago. And what's I think was reported was the increase in sales in the month of June and July. And yes, June and July, our dealers, our manufacturers were very, very busy because basically they couldn't sell any boats in March, April, and May. So the season has just been compressed into June and July, and I expect that August is going to be very, very good too. But there's 248,000 registered boats in Washington state. That places us number 17th in the United States for registered boats. The high water mark for registered boats in the last 20 years was 2008, when there was 270,000 registered boats in Washington state. So, I don't think it's the new boats that are on the water so much as people are using their boats. They can't do anything else, so they're rediscovering their boats, if you will. And we're seeing, people return to boating and that sort of thing. So, so I think as a community, and I think maybe something, Lorena and Leonard could add here, kind of what are the norms for boaters? What should we be doing on the water when it comes to the whales and things like that? If there's any new boaters or people that are getting back into it, or somebody who's trailered their boat over from Spokane and they've gone to the San Juan Islands or the state parks for the first time. And I think that's been a good purpose of Seattle Boat Show Live.
Yeah.
Leonard, do you want to talk about some of the practices you and Lorena do? You had a situation with a whale watching boat about a week ago, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We were in Griffin Bay, kind of between Lopez and San Juan Island, and there was a whale watching boat that we noticed, and we're already a slow boat. We're 7.5, 8 knots at max, or at a normal cruise. But the whale watch boat was there. It really was a thing that alerted us that there might be whales around, and so we were maneuvering, and as usual, the whale had its own decision about where it was going to go, and so we had to alter course once again. We were going to pass on the port side of the whale watch boat, and then the whale moved to the other side. And one thing we did, we were looking for the whale alert flag. Dan, if you have the whale alert flag, we were looking for that, and the larger whale watching boat was not flying that. There was a smaller, much smaller, probably a 30-foot with only about a half a dozen passengers. And they were, it's a whale watching boat as well, and they were flying the flag. But all of that helped us, alerted us that the whale was nearby. And we skirted around there. George's comment that recreational boaters we're generally not out there looking for whales. And we're going from point A to point B. If we happen to see one along the way, that's wonderful, but that's not, we don't traditionally linger around when a whale is there.
Yeah, Leonard, what kind of whale was it? Was it an orca or was it a gray or a humpback?
You're asking the person that's not very, Lorena.
I think it was gray.
Yeah, and I think that's where the whale warning flag is especially important for the grays and the humpbacks, because they dive deeper and longer than the orcas. So, a whale watching boat might be viewing a humpback, and then it might be down for 10 minutes or more. And, boats coming up on the whale watch boat may not see anything or be aware that you can't see any animals or anything like that. So I think that's where the whale warning flag is extra helpful for the humpbacks and the grays.
It was helpful. I said this is a slightly whimsical, but a slightly serious statement, and that is it would be absolutely wonderful if there was something that could pop up on my chart plotter as in an AIS display that says there's whales nearby. So I know it sounds totally wrong, and it is totally wrong to say that if we could equip whales with AIS transponders that would help us, but it's the slightly serious comment is, man, if there were some technology or something that would help us beyond the flag, that would be wonderful.
It was about an hour ago that George and I were having a similar conversation. Is it worth mentioning a Securite call on the channel 16 or the appropriate channel, or is it just best to keep mum's the word? And George, what conclusion did you draw?
Why, from the task force, and Todd will certainly have some comments about it. From the task force, we wrestled with this. Should there be an announcement on, the location of the southern residents, and for recreational vessels? And in the end, the consensus on the task force was no, we should not. But there are commercial channels, and I believe, Todd, the commercial traffic is communicating about the presence of the southern residents. Did I get that right?
Well, I know that the commercial whale watchers are in communication with each other about them, and they'll reach out to recreational vessels in their vicinity if they're encroaching on the whales, and let them know of their presence, and honk their horns, and try to alert folks in the area to them. On the shipping side, we have from the Canadians the development of a whale report alert system that lets the commercial mariners know about the presence of a variety of species in alerts, and so that they can be notified on the bridge and potentially slow down, alter course, increase their situational awareness. Washington State Ferries has adopted that whale report alert system to notify their captains when they're in the vicinity of southern residents and other species. So there's a lot of good communication happening throughout the system.
Excellent. Well, as we wrap up here, anything else that we want to ask our two experts, George and Todd? Karin or Dan, Landon's, Mark?
No, I just think that they're doing great work. George, I've watched, and Karin and I've watched as we've traveled from here to Alaska, and just the great attention and public knowledge that you guys are bringing to it is so awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think, I got to know some of the folks that operate the commercial whale watch boats during the task force, and then, was able to continue sort of that relationship with my time in the San Juans. And, I was talking to one of the operators the other day, and what he was saying is, it's when the whales are, off of Friday Harbor, or off of Thatcher Pass or something like that, that he's seeing the recreational boats. But when they're out in more remote places, they're not seeing any recreational boats. So it's when it's easy and, I guess, convenient, they're there, you're coming into Friday Harbor. Who wouldn't want to, the rule is you got to slow down. Who wouldn't want to maybe linger a little bit and take some pictures and things like that? So again, just encouraging boaters to, do the right thing, be role models, slow down, take a few pictures, and cruise on into wherever you're headed.
Todd, are we seeing, or are you seeing evidence from the researchers that you talk to that the situation is getting better or worse?
I can say that the number of 73 and the reproductive success we've seen in the last few years is not good. But the fact that we have 3, one in each pod that are pregnant right now is a hopeful sign, and that the task force recognized that the southern residents face 3 principal threats: contaminants, scarcity of prey, and the influence of vessels that inhibits their communication and echolocation. And the thing we can turn around fastest, and we need all 3 we may make progress on all 3, but the thing that we can do that we have control over is on the vessels front. We have more tools that we can apply right now than we can for Chinook that take 4 years to come back fat for the whale to eat. So I really want to reassure folks that doing these things to put the southern residents in better conditions to successfully forage and raise their young is going to be the best we can do, and it's an awful lot.
Todd, how long is the gestation period for a whale? Came up as a question last week, and somebody, is it 18 months?
I'll have to go back, and it's many months, and it depends on the species, their size. It's all proportional to their body length and the type of whale that they are. But one of those demographic peculiarities, they live. Our southern residents live a long time, and they, Granny, who died a couple of years ago, was around 100 or so, and still plying the waters and leading all of the pods, and especially Jay, around. And so there's a lot of similarities there between us and the southern residents.
To Leonard's point earlier, I just wanted to share, Senator Rolfus, Chair of Ways and Means from the Bainbridge Island, emailed me earlier in the week about how Google is building artificial intelligence to help ships and whales coexist. And there's a podcast and an article from the Wall Street Journal that was kind of took my breath away when it got to the technology and all the innovation that's occurring on the front when we think about whales and shipping. So that's now in the chat box. And Todd, I can send that to you later if you hadn't seen it.
Okay.
So Peter, I took a peek at a question that came in, something we mentioned earlier.
That's not what we asked you to be on the show to do, George.
Oh,
that's
sorry.
spiral. Yeah.
But,
That's okay, George, go for it.
It was a question: is 50 kilohertz sonar or 200 kilohertz sonar safer for the whales? And the answer is 200 kilohertz is safer. Is that correct, Todd?
That is correct. But I want folks to know that some of the entry-level models of transducers, even though you might switch and think you're successfully not using the 50 kilohertz, when you switch to 200, in some of those lower-end models, they still are emitting at that 50 hertz, but you just don't see it on the display. So it's usually the higher order units that allow us to separate the two. And so that's why our policies are we're trying to be simple and let folks know that it's best to turn off when safe to do so, as long as you remember to turn it back on. But failing that, switching will work too. It's just sometimes you may not be achieving the end goal, but that couldn't hurt. 200 is outside their range of hearing.
So Leonard and I had a conversation on this after our last show, and Leonard pointed out on his SIMRAD system, he can't separate out the depth sounder and turn that off. On my Raymarine system, I can turn off the depth sounder, although Todd, now you have me wondering whether it's actually turning it off or just not displaying it. But it sounds like in some cases, people may have to turn off their entire MFD system and cruise with normal pilotage for a little bit. And it might be good to find out. Yes, Dan, yeah, we pull out those paper maps.
Oh my gosh, a paper chart.
Yeah. But these are the kinds of things that we need to consider doing to help the whales.
Yep.
Well, good stuff.
And we've
Well,
tried also to reach out to the Recreational Boating Association in Washington as we developed many of these rules within the task force and subsequently with the Puget Sound Harbor Safety Committee. So we really are trying to bring in your wisdom and make these things, sensible for the whales and safe for all of us.
And we're going to continue to do that with Seattle Boat Show Live. We've been impressed by how people have reacted to this, and it's a subject we need to continue to touch on and continue to get an update. I'm waiting to hear, and that's why I brought it up about the gestation period, how this latest group does in terms of a new baby whale. Those of you probably remember Taliqua, which is one of the whales now pregnant. Her baby died shortly after birth, and she ended up pushing that baby around for 17 days. And that story got coverage all over the world. Just the unfortunate situation of this mama pushing her baby around for 17 days. So those kinds of things, while sad, really do get our attention to how critical this problem is and what we can all do about it.
Dr. Google's telling me that the gestation period mark is 15 to 18 months. So there you go.
I won on that one. I didn't know 15.
Pay up.
I went for 18. Good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, cool. Well, if we don't have anything else on this topic, we can start wrapping up here and talk about next week's show. Mark, what do you think? What do you think about next week's show?
We're working on it now. We're, I'm still working on pulling in our one of our nurses to talk about seasickness, and she's got this great acronym, and I thought it was for BARF, and it wasn't for BARF. It's HURL, and I'll just give everybody a hint. The H is hydrate, and tune in next week, and I'll give you what the rest of the acronym is for HURL. I never knew what it stood for, and so we'll have a little fun with that, and they've got some remedies that if you have guests or even if you have a tinge of seasickness, of what you can do about that, as well as tips and even medications that you could consider taking. So that's going to be coming up. We've got a couple of other topics, and I had to reach out today. I get all kinds of people asking me questions, and one came up today and I couldn't answer it, and I had to get on my hotline to Dan Leech. And somebody had reached out to me and said, oh, I was told if I take my boat out of the water and let it sit in the yard for 2 weeks, that my bottom paint will lose its effectiveness. And then somebody was trying to talk them into spending for new bottom paint before they launched the boat, which I thought was an interesting sales pitch. And Dan helped clarify this for me. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, as I said when you called, it's like I never left, right? It's like,
right.
Hard bottom paints, you can do that too. And on ablative bottom paints, Historically, you could not do that. You can't pull them out of the water, but the folks at Pettit and Interlux have both been trying to address it. So the bottom line is, if you have hard paint, you don't have to worry about it. If you have ablative paint, you need to read the instructions, because some of their paints you can now, some of the ablative paints you can now round trip without damaging them, but you got to read the instructions.
So how's that for a tidbit most of us never knew? Leonard, you're my other source. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll keep coming up with these tips like Hurl and bottom paint. And on that, I think, on the note of Hurl, I think that's where we should probably end.
Well, I think
Peter,
so.
do you want to take us out?
Yeah,
Hey,
I was.
Mark, can I, one question, how are we doing on Lake Bay?
You know, I called Bob to get an update on that. I didn't get, but those of you still interested in donating for the Lake Bay Marina, go to the website for our Recreational Boating Association of Washington. They've got a link to the site. Last week, Bob said we were somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. Still trying to raise 900,000, so we got to try a little bit harder. And our deadline is the end of September to save the Lake Bay Marina. So if you're at all interested in this, there's information on the website. You can call Steve Finney, and he'll be happy to talk to you about that. And if you are sitting on a nice trust fund and need to put it in a good place, this is an excellent opportunity for all of us.
Also keep in mind, it's not only the marina and docks and the buildings, but it's a nice piece of property, forested, opportunity for trails, and we don't want to miss this opportunity. Just like Susha, the boaters in the 50s came up and kind of saved the day. We have the opportunity to save the day here now for Lake Bay. And if you want Steve Finney's phone number, I think that's on the chat.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the website, but if you have the phone number, that's great. I'm sending along Steve's. I'm sure Steve's going to love this. I'm sending along his email address.
Yeah,
so,
Steve's phone number.
Peter sent you.
206-234-7409, and tell him we said hello.
That's right.
We were sitting at home
thinking of this. The phone will be blowing up.
We were thinking of the of Lake Bay. Literally, we were at Susha the other day and hiking some of the trails after anchoring out in Echo Bay, and what a spectacular place. And I was just thinking about those forthright, those forward-thinking people in the 50s or 60s that put all of that together and made it happen, and thanking them and thinking about it's our turn to do that now with Lake Bay.
I think there are several yacht clubs out there that are working to put in substantial donations. And so please keep it coming. We can do it.
Yeah, Todd, that's actually why we had you on the show. We wanted you to put us over the top tonight with a sizable donation. So
he didn't tell you, Todd?
Well, I think that's a wrap. It's August 20th. Mark may be the first person to wish you a National Chocolate Pecan Pie Day. I don't think you.
I had no idea.
Right. Yeah, well, aren't you glad you tuned in? Peter? Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. And then this is our 14th episode, which the 14th episode of Saturday Night Live, the host would have been
Jill Clayburgh.
No, Desi Arnaz, and then he also, and this Desi Arnaz Jr. is also the musical guest. So there you go.
Wow, a double hitter on that.
World is rocked. All right, well, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you all very much. Be safe out on the water. Have a great time. Thanks for joining us.
Wear your mask.
Thank you.
Yes.